Imagine a world where there are no predators left on Earth. No lions, no crocodiles, no wolves or foxes, not even eagles. What would happen to the animal kingdom, which has evolved for billions of years under the constant pressure of predators? Who would become the king of beasts? In a world without predators, the entire Earth would become a feast for herbivores. Imagine the scene. Endless meadows, dense forests full of lush foliage and grass, and no danger. The first thing that would change is the incredible number of animals. Populations would simply explode, as there would be no natural selection to remove the weak and old. Herds of antelope, zebras, and deer wouldn't just be large. They would turn into living carpets stretching to the horizon, their numbers not in the thousands, but hundreds of thousands, even millions of individuals. Migrations would take on truly biblical scales, with streams of animals flowing across continents in search of new pastures, leaving devastated landscapes in their wake. We would also see amazing changes in the size of the animals themselves. Without the need to escape predators, many herbivores could afford to become significantly larger. Let's imagine giant deer with antlers that could reach 3 meters or more in span. These majestic creatures would be true walking fortresses. Modern elephants would seem like dwarfs compared to what they could become. Their descendants could surpass extinct mammoths, reaching weights of 15 to 20 tons and heights of over 5 meters. Without the threat of attack, there would be no need for them to be fast, and they could simply become bigger and stronger to dominate in the struggle for vegetation. Perhaps giant herbivores would emerge from completely unexpected groups. For example, giant rodents the size of hippos, or colossal flightless ground birds, capable of sustaining themselves on the abundance of vegetation. In a world without predators, large herbivores would come to dominate, specifically those most effective at consuming vegetation and capable of withstanding competition for it. Massive herbivores like elephants, rhinos, and giraffes would become absolute kings. Their size and strength would allow them to access the highest branches and densest thickets. They would literally reshape the landscape, creating their own elephant trails that smaller animals would then follow. Paradoxically, these giants would become the primary landscape architects. Their continuous consumption of vegetation would lead to vast open plains interspersed with areas of young, actively growing plants that would quickly replenish losses. Smaller but extremely numerous species, such as bison, wild horses, and antelopes, would also thrive, forming immense, dense herds that would migrate in search of food, consuming everything in their path. Their strength would lie in their sheer numbers. But this world of incredible abundance would harbor the seeds of its own demise. Without predators, sooner or later, the Earth itself wouldn't be able to sustain such a vast number of creatures. In a world where herbivores thrived unchecked by predators, dramatic and devastating consequences would soon follow. The idyllic picture of abundance would give way to a chain of ecological disasters. Massive herds of herbivores would begin to literally graze the planet bare. Vegetation, without time to recover, would quickly become depleted. Meadows would turn into deserts, forests into sparse groves, and shrubs would disappear entirely. Animals would consume not only leaves and grass, but also tree bark, roots, and young shoots, destroying future generations of plants. Many plant species, especially slow-growing ones or those requiring specific conditions, wouldn't withstand such pressure and would go extinct. Furthermore, as vegetation disappears, plant roots would no longer hold the soil. Rains and winds would quickly wash away and blow away the fertile topsoil. The lack of vegetation would lead to accelerated water evaporation, reduced air humidity, and a change in the microclimate, making it drier and more arid. Ultimately, entire regions that were once flourishing gardens would transform into barren deserts, uninhabitable for life. As vegetation is destroyed the enormous herbivore populations would face a catastrophic food shortage. Millions of animals would begin to die from starvation. This would lead to a population collapse far more brutal than any impact from predators. But a lack of food isn't the only disaster. In overpopulated and starvation-weakened populations, diseases would spread at an unprecedented rate. Predators typically remove weak and sick individuals, preventing the spread of infections. Without them, viruses and bacteria would mutate and decimate entire herds. Who would dominate in such an animal world? In the absence of predators, the most numerous herbivore species would likely be one possessing the following characteristics. High reproductive rate. Species capable of quickly producing large offspring would increase their numbers incredibly fast. Indiscriminate diet. The ability to consume various types of plants would allow them to survive in conditions of changing resource availability. High adaptability to diverse habitats. Species capable of colonizing diverse landscapes, forests, meadows, wetlands, would have more opportunities to expand their habitat. Disease resistance. Although predators remove sick individuals in their absence, diseases could become the primary population regulator. Therefore, resistance to viruses would be critically important. Efficient digestion. The ability to maximally extract nutrient from plant food would allow them to survive even on less nutritious feeds. Based on these criteria, the most likely candidates are mice and rabbits. They have an incredibly high reproductive rate. They are omnivorous, can eat seeds, grass, roots, sometimes even insects. They adapt very quickly to new conditions, and they are found almost everywhere. Their small size means they require fewer resources to survive. The absence of predators would affect not only the animal world but also the climate as a whole. The large-scale destruction of forests and vegetation would lead to a change in the atmospheric gas composition, an increase in CO2, which would exacerbate the greenhouse effect and global warming. Furthermore, the disappearance of vegetation would disrupt the water cycle, alter precipitation patterns, and intensify droughts. How would the absence of predators affect the life and development of humanity? The development of agriculture in a world without predators would face unprecedented difficulties, significantly differing from the path it took in our reality. Instead of gradually improving and expanding, it would constantly be under threat of annihilation and would require colossal efforts to maintain a minimal harvest. The lack of natural control over herbivore populations would lead to their rapid growth. Huge herds of ungulates, swarms of mice and rabbits, and countless insects would constantly devastate fields. Any attempts to grow grains, vegetables, or fruits would be doomed to rapid and total failure unless extraordinary protective measures were employed. Primitive methods, such as scarecrows, loud noises, or even primitive traps, would be absolutely ineffective against such pressure. Bonfires could be used to deter animals, but their scale and duration would require enormous resources. Agricultural communities would be forced to live in strictly protected settlements. Fields would be surrounded by massive, high, and sturdy fences, stone walls, and deep moats. The construction of such fortifications would demand immense labor and time, diverting resources from farming itself. Every plot of land where something grew would require constant, round-the-clock guarding. People would likely take turns patrolling the fields, driving away animals with noise, fire, or even primitive weapons. This would result in a large portion of the population being occupied not with producing food, but with protecting it. Perhaps an approach to agriculture would develop where small, critically important plots of land would transform into true fortress gardens within or directly adjacent to settlements, where every crop would be under maximum protection. Additionally, people would likely focus on cultivating crops that yield the maximum harvest on minimal land, or those that are less attractive to herbivores, or have natural defense mechanisms, thorns, bitter taste. In some regions where herbivore pressure was extreme, forms of underground farming, e.g., in caves or dug pits, might develop to protect crops. Raising cows, sheep, and goats for milk will become almost impossible due to competition for feed with wild herbivores and the need to protect huge herds. If it existed at all, it would be on a very limited scale, possibly in completely enclosed stalls, and would be extremely inefficient. The constant struggle for survival and crop protection would lead to a lack of significant food surpluses. This, in turn, would slow the development of specialized professions, science, art, and urban life. Society would remain extremely primitive, focused solely on basic needs. Thus, agriculture in a world without predators would be less about food production and more about a constant war for the survival of every sprout. It's a world where humans wouldn't be able to freely cultivate new lands, expand crops, or develop effective farming methods, as every patch of land suitable for cultivation would be a target for countless hordes of herbivores. This could lead to stagnation or even regression of human development. In a world lacking natural predators, where herbivore populations spiraled out of control, humanity would face an unprecedented ecological crisis. The role of regulator would fall squarely on human shoulders. What methods would people resort to? Large-scale culling campaigns would be a direct approach to reducing herbivore numbers. This would involve organized hunting efforts, but it would demand immense resources, highly trained personnel, and would likely spark significant public backlash. For culling to be effective, it would need to be continuous and consistently aimed to bring populations down to sustainable levels. The development and spread of specific diseases that only affect target herbivore species is another potential method. However, this is an extremely risky strategy. There's a high chance a disease could mutate and spread beyond its intended targets, potentially affecting other animals, including domesticated livestock or even humans. Birth control through sterilization is arguably the most humane option for managing populations. Despite its ethical appeal, it would be incredibly expensive and labor-intensive to implement on a large scale for wild animal populations, making it a challenging solution. Finally, habitat management could play a crucial role in controlling out-of-control herbivores. This might involve planting plant species that are inedible to them, or constructing physical barriers and fences to protect valuable vegetation from being overgrazed. Ultimately, a world without predators, which at first glance seems like a paradise for herbivores, would in reality become a nightmare of ecological collapse. Here, starvation and diseases would prove to be far more merciless population regulators than any predator. This vividly demonstrates how vital every element is within Earth's complex and interconnected web of life.